You know that feeling of being spiritually exhausted. You meditate, you read, you follow teachers, and somehow it still feels like something's missing. So here's a question that might sound a little uncomfortable. What if modern spirituality is actually keeping you stuck? For thousands of years, Hinduism, yoga, and Advaita Vedanta have warned about this exact trap. If you listen closely, you'll notice they keep pointing to the same thing. Awakening isn't about becoming better, calmer, or more enlightened. And honestly, the obsession with self-improvement might be the very thing blocking clarity. Here's the part nobody tells you. The Vedas never promised transformation. They pointed to recognition. Not a future version of you, but what's already here beneath the noise. That's why ancient yogic traditions aligned awakening with cycles, silence, solstice rituals, and inner stillness, not endless striving. Think about it. Every year, around the solstice, you feel an urge to pause, reflect, reset. Yet culture pushes you to consume, rush, and perform happiness instead. That tension isn't random. It's a forgetting of rhythm, of awareness, of self. Advaita Vedanta makes a radical claim. You are not broken. You are not unfinished. You're not on a spiritual ladder climbing toward truth. You are awareness itself, temporarily distracted. And the Mahabharata hides this truth in a story almost no one talks about. A story where heaven is offered and refused, not out of rebellion, but integrity. If you've ever felt like spiritual answers sound beautiful but don't land in real life, if you've ever wondered why peace feels closer in silence than in effort, this episode isn't here to give you more beliefs. It's here to help you remember something ancient, something simple, and something quietly life-changing. And if this kind of content speaks to you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. These conversations are for people who feel there's more to life than what's usually offered, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Most people grow up thinking spirituality is about believing in something higher, following rules, or behaving like a better person. Sounds familiar, right? But here's the twist. In the oldest spiritual traditions, especially within Hinduism and Advaita Vedanta, spirituality was never about belief at all. It was about seeing. Seeing what's already here. Seeing what's already awake. That misunderstanding alone explains why so many people meditate, pray, and still feel empty inside. In the yogic worldview, awakening isn't something you earn, deserve, or achieve after years of effort. It's something you recognize. Like realizing you were wearing glasses the whole time while desperately looking for them. The Vedas, long before modern self-help culture, already warned about this trap. Searching outside for what was never lost inside. And honestly, that changes everything about how one approaches spiritual practice. Here's where the West often slips. It treats spirituality like a project, a goal, another item on the to-do list. I'll meditate more. I'll be more mindful. I'll become enlightened someday. Advaita Vedanta gently laughs at that mindset, not in a mocking way, more like a compassionate smile. Because how can the self search for the self? How can awareness try to become aware? In Sanatana Dharma, the eternal path of Hinduism, life itself is the spiritual classroom. Work, relationships, joy, frustration, all of it is yoga. That's why yoga was never meant to be confined to a mat or a studio. Karma yoga, for example, teaches action without attachment, meaning you do your best, but you don't tie your piece to the outcome. Imagine how different modern life would feel if that idea were actually lived. Think about everyday stress, deadlines, money worries, expectations. The yogic lens doesn't say escape the world. It says change how you meet it. A simple example. When working, give full attention, but drop the obsession with praise or fear of failure. That's karma yoga in action. No incense required. No retreat ticket needed. Just awareness showing up in ordinary moments. Now here's where rituals enter the picture, especially ancient solstice rituals. In Vedic culture, solstices weren't about celebration alone, they were reminders. The longest night of the year symbolized inward turning, silence, stillness, the same inner movement encouraged in meditation. Long before Christmas lights and shopping lists, these rituals honored the return of light as a metaphor for inner clarity, awakening after darkness. This is why many yogic traditions see the winter solstice as a spiritual checkpoint. Not a party, a pause. A moment to ask, where has my attention been? The Vedas often link light not to morality, but to knowledge. Ignorance is darkness. Understanding is light. That symbolism quietly survived, even as cultures and religions changed names and stories. Advaita Vedanta takes this insight even further. It suggests that suffering doesn't come from life being hard, but from misunderstanding who we are. We identify as the body, the thoughts, the emotions. Then life shakes those things, and we suffer. The sages would say, that's not punishment, it's confusion. Avidya, ignorance. And ignorance, unlike sin, doesn't need forgiveness. It needs clarity. Here's something practical you can test right now. When a thought arises, anxiety, self-criticism, anticipation, instead of fighting it, ask quietly, who is aware of this thought? Don't answer intellectually, just notice. That simple inquiry, central to Advaita Vedanta, shifts attention from the noise to the space in which the noise appears. Subtle, yes. Powerful, absolutely. And this is where the story deepens. Because these ideas weren't taught only through philosophy or scriptures. They were embedded in stories, living metaphors meant to be remembered when logic fails. The Mahabharata, especially, hides some of the most radical spiritual truths not in battles, but in quiet moral choices. One such story, rarely told, carries a lesson that hits uncomfortably close to home. And that's where we're heading next. When people hear the word Hinduism, they often imagine a religion with countless gods, rituals, and rigid beliefs. But Sanatana Dharma doesn't really fit that box. The phrase itself means the eternal way, pointing not to a belief system, but to an underlying order of reality. In this view, spirituality isn't something you join, it's something you remember. And that subtle difference changes how awakening is approached from the very first step. Unlike many modern traditions, Sanatana Dharma never tried to convert the world. It assumed truth didn't need marketing. The Vedas speak to different temperaments, different stages of life, different inner needs. That's why Hindu spirituality feels so vast. Not because it's complicated, but because it's inclusive. It understands that consciousness expresses itself in countless forms, yet remains fundamentally one. This is where Advaita Vedanta quietly lives inside Hinduism like its sharpest blade. While rituals, stories, and practices exist, Advaita asks a daring question: who is the one experiencing all of this? It doesn't deny gods, practices, or devotion. It simply refuses to stop there. It nudges the seeker past form, past symbol, straight into direct self-inquiry. Not everyone is ready for that, and that's okay. The yogic traditions understood something modern life often forgets. People don't all awaken the same way. Some need devotion, others discipline, others understanding. That's why bhakti yoga, karma yoga, and jnana yoga coexist. If someone is emotionally inclined, devotion opens the heart. If action-driven, selfless service purifies the ego. If intellectually curious, inquiry cuts through illusion. Same mountain, different paths. Here's a practical way this shows up today. Someone overwhelmed by work might practice karma yoga by offering their effort, without clinging to recognition. Someone emotionally restless might turn to bhakti through chanting or quiet gratitude rituals. Someone constantly overthinking might benefit from reading texts like the Upanishads or Ashtavakra Gita, not to memorize them, but to let their questions dissolve old assumptions. Rituals in Hinduism were never meant to impress the gods. That's a common misunderstanding. Vedic rituals, especially those tied to solstices, aligned human attention with cosmic rhythms. Fire rituals symbolized transformation. Light symbolized knowledge. Silence symbolized truth beyond words. These weren't superstitions. They were inner technologies, designed to shape awareness in a time before psychology existed. The winter solstice held particular weight. As days shortened, people turned inward. Less noise, less movement, more reflection. In many ways, this mirrors what modern seekers feel intuitively around the end of the year. The urge to pause, reassess, and reset. What later became Christmas celebrations once echoed this same inner gesture, honoring light not just in the sky but in consciousness itself. Sanatana Dharma never separated spirituality from daily life. Raising children, earning money, facing loss, all of it was part of Dharma. That's why the Hindu worldview feels grounded rather than escapist. You weren't asked to abandon the world, only to see through it, to participate fully, while slowly loosening the knot of ego that turns experience into suffering. One simple practice inspired by this worldview is intentional living. Before reacting, pause. Before speaking, notice. Before acting, ask, is this aligned with clarity or compulsion? That tiny space between impulse and action is where yoga actually happens. Not dramatic, not mystical, just deeply human and quietly transformative over time. And yet, philosophy alone rarely sticks. That's why Hinduism preserved its deepest insights in stories, narratives meant to bypass the intellect and land directly in the heart. The Mahabharata is full of them. Not heroic tales of victory, but subtle moments where integrity, identity, and truth are tested. One such story unfolds not on a battlefield, but on a long, silent walk toward the mountains. Long before calendars were digital and time felt like something to outrun, ancient Hindu sages watched the sky. Not out of curiosity alone, but reverence. The solstice wasn't just an astronomical event, it was a mirror. A reminder that life moves in cycles, not straight lines. The Vedas speak of time as rhythmic, alive, intelligent. And when you really sit with that idea, it quietly challenges the modern obsession with constant progress. In the Vedic worldview, the sun symbolized more than heat or light. It represented awareness itself. As days shortened during the winter solstice, rituals encouraged a turning inward. Less external activity, more inner listening. This wasn't about sadness or withdrawal. It was about recalibration. Just like nature rests before renewal, consciousness benefits from silence before clarity. Here's where things get interesting. Many people today feel an unexplained heaviness at the end of the year. Fatigue, reflection, a desire to pause. The yogic traditions would say, that's not depression, it's instinct, ancestral memory. The body and mind still respond to cycles, even if culture pretends time is linear and infinite. The solstice simply amplifies what's already happening inside. The Vedas describe time through vast cycles, yugas within yugas, reminding humanity that decline and renewal are natural, not personal failures. Advaita Vedanta takes this insight inward. Thoughts rise and fall, emotions come and go, identities form and dissolve. But awareness remains unchanged. When someone stops resisting cycles, suffering softens, life stops feeling like a problem to solve and starts feeling like a rhythm to move with. There's a simple practice inspired by this wisdom. Around the solstice, instead of setting aggressive goals, try observing patterns. What drains energy? What quietly nourishes it? Write it down, not to judge, just to notice. This mirrors ancient solstice rituals that focused less on asking for more and more on understanding what already is. Interestingly, many elements of modern Christmas still echo these older Vedic themes. Light and darkness, candles, quiet nights. Even the idea of rebirth aligns with solstice symbolism. What changed wasn't the core gesture, it was the interpretation. Where the Vedas pointed inward, modern culture often points outward. Consumption replaced contemplation. Noise replaced silence. Yogic spirituality doesn't reject celebration. It simply asks for awareness within it. You can enjoy gatherings, food, music, and still honor the inner solstice. A few minutes of stillness in the morning. A short walk without headphones. A moment of gratitude before sleep. Small rituals, done consciously, reconnect modern life with ancient rhythms. Advaita Vedanta would add a subtle layer here. It would say, the real solstice happens when attention turns back to its source. Darkness isn't something to fight. It's simply the absence of clarity. And clarity doesn't arrive by force. It arrives by stopping, listening, and seeing what was always present. This understanding gently reframes spiritual awakening. It's not a dramatic explosion of light. It's more like dawn, gradual, quiet, almost unnoticed at first. And just like dawn, it follows a natural cycle. Trying to rush it only creates tension. Trusting the rhythm allows insight to unfold without strain. And this rhythm isn't meant to stay abstract. Hindu philosophy embedded it into daily living through yoga, not as exercise, but as a way of aligning action, devotion, and understanding with the flow of life. To see how that works, we need to step beyond the seasons and into the deeper science of yoga itself. When most people hear the word yoga, they picture flexibility, breathing exercises, maybe a calm playlist in the background. Useful? Sure. Complete? Not even close. In the Hindu and yogic traditions, yoga was never designed as fitness. It was designed as a technology for awakening, a practical system to help consciousness recognize itself right in the middle of ordinary life. The ancient yogis understood something crucial. The mind doesn't jump into clarity all at once. It needs preparation. That's why yoga unfolds in different forms, each addressing a layer of human experience. Karma yoga refines action. Bhakti yoga softens the heart. Jnana yoga sharpens discernment. Together, they create inner balance, not by force, but by alignment. Karma yoga, in particular, feels almost revolutionary today. It teaches action without attachment to results. Do what needs to be done, fully, then let go. Imagine working without your self-worth riding on praise, money, or outcomes. Stress drops. Presence increases. The action stays the same, but the inner friction dissolves. That's yoga in motion. Bhakti yoga works differently. It channels emotion, longing, devotion, gratitude towards something larger than the ego. This could be a deity, a mantra, or even the intelligence of life itself. In Vedic culture, especially during solstice rituals, bhakti helped dissolve isolation. It reminded people they were part of a vast, living order, not separate fragments struggling alone. A simple bhakti-inspired practice still works today. Choose a short mantra or phrase that resonates, even something as simple as, "I offer this moment." Repeat it quietly while walking, cooking, or before sleep. It's not about belief, it's about softening resistance. Over time, the nervous system learns to trust life instead of bracing against it. Then comes jnana yoga, the sharp edge. This path asks direct questions. Who am I? What remains when thoughts stop? What is aware of experience? Advaita Vedanta lives here, not as abstract philosophy but as inquiry. Reading texts like the Upanishads, Vivekachudamani, or Ashtavakra Gita isn't about collecting answers. It's about dissolving false assumptions. Here's the key insight. Yoga was never meant to create a better ego. It was meant to expose the illusion of the ego entirely. That's why Advaita sees yoga as preparation, not the final step. Yoga steadies the mind. Advaita reveals what the mind cannot grasp. Together, they form a complete path, grounded and radical at the same time. This also explains why yogic spirituality never rejected the world. Work becomes karma yoga, love becomes bhakti, understanding becomes jnana, life itself becomes practice. Even during ancestral solstice periods, when external activity slowed, inner inquiry intensified. Less movement outside created more clarity within. A modern way to live this is integration, not addition. You don't need more practices. You need presence in what you already do. When sending an email, notice the breath. When listening, actually listen. When reacting, pause. That pause is yoga, subtle, invisible, transformative over time. And yet, even yoga has a limit. It can purify the mind, but it cannot answer the deepest question alone. Eventually, the seeker reaches a quiet edge, where effort softens and understanding takes over. That edge is where Advaita Vedanta begins to speak, and where the idea of a separate self starts to unravel. Advaita Vedanta begins with a statement so simple it almost feels disappointing. There is only one reality, not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. The sages weren't trying to inspire. They were pointing to the fact that what you truly are has never been divided, never been missing, never been on a journey toward awakening. The journey, they'd say, was the misunderstanding. In this view, the problem isn't that life is confusing. The problem is mistaken identity. We assume we are the body, the thoughts, the emotions, the story with a past and a future. Advaita quietly asks, are you those experiences, or the awareness in which they appear? That single question has echoed through the Upanishads for thousands of years, not to confuse, but to simplify. This is where Advaita feels radically different from most spiritual paths. It doesn't promise improvement. It doesn't sell progress. It doesn't offer a better version of you. In fact, it gently dismantles the entire idea of becoming. Awakening, in this tradition, isn't adding something new. It's seeing through what was never real to begin with. The mind struggles here, and that's normal. The ego loves effort. It loves ladders, steps, achievements. Advaita pulls the ladder away. It says, the one trying to awaken is itself the illusion, not in a dramatic way, just in a factual one. Like realizing a shadow you've been chasing doesn't actually exist on its own. Here's a simple inquiry anyone can try. Sit quietly and notice a thought arise. Instead of following it, ask, to whom does this thought appear? Let the question hang without answering. What remains is not blankness, it's presence. That presence doesn't need to be improved, fixed, or trained. It already is what it is. Advaita Vedanta often uses the metaphor of light. Thoughts, emotions, memories. These are objects illuminated. Awareness is the light itself. During ancient solstice rituals, light symbolized knowledge not because it fights darkness, but because darkness was never an entity of its own. Ignorance disappears the moment understanding dawns. No battle required. This is why Advaita sees ignorance, avidya, not as a moral failure, but as a simple error of perception. You don't punish someone for mistaking a rope for a snake. You show them the rope. In the same way, suffering dissolves when identity shifts from the transient to the timeless. No self-improvement plan needed. And yet, this teaching is handled carefully in Hindu traditions. Not everyone is ready to hear it. Without preparation, the mind may twist non-duality into apathy or denial. That's why yoga, devotion, and ethical living remain essential. They mature the mind so Advaita can land as clarity, not confusion. A practical way to live this insight is simplicity. When something triggers you, notice the reaction without personalizing it. Let it rise, peak, and fall. Over time, you'll see patterns dissolve on their own, not because you fixed them, but because you stopped identifying with them. That shift is subtle, but it changes how life is experienced. Still, philosophy alone rarely transforms. Advaita knew this. That's why its deepest insights were often embedded in stories, not explanations. Stories where truth is revealed through choice, integrity, and silence. One such story, hidden deep inside the Mahabharata, unfolds not in glory, but in loyalty, humility, and an unexpected companion on the road ahead. In the Advaita Vedanta view, suffering doesn't arrive as punishment, fate, or bad luck. It arrives quietly, through misunderstanding. The sages used a precise word for this, avidya. Not ignorance as stupidity, but ignorance as forgetfulness. Forgetting what you are, then trying to survive as something you're not. From there, tension is almost guaranteed. Most modern pain follows this pattern. People don't suffer because life is demanding. They suffer because identity is fragile. When self-worth is tied to roles, outcomes, or opinions, every change feels like a threat. Hindu philosophy never blamed the world for this. It pointed inward, gently suggesting that the root of pain is misplaced identification. This is why Advaita Vedanta feels strangely compassionate. It doesn't shame the seeker. It doesn't label desire as sinful. It simply says, you're looking from the wrong place, like someone trying to calm waves instead of realizing they are the ocean. Once that insight lands, the struggle softens almost on its own. The yogic traditions noticed this early. They saw that when awareness collapses into thought, emotion takes over. When emotion takes over, action becomes reactive. And when action becomes reactive, suffering multiplies. That's why yoga was never about suppression. It was about space, creating enough inner room for clarity to reappear. Here's a practical example anyone can test. The next time anxiety shows up, don't try to fix it. Sit with it for 60 seconds. Notice where it appears in the body. Notice how it changes. Then quietly ask, is this permanent? This isn't a trick. It's observation. And observation weakens identification without effort. Ancient Hindu rituals, especially those aligned with solstices, mirrored this same principle. Darkness wasn't treated as evil. It was treated as a phase, a necessary contraction before expansion. In the same way, emotional lows weren't seen as failures. They were invitations to turn inward, listen, and recalibrate awareness. Advaita takes this further by making a bold claim. The one who suffers is not who you truly are. Suffering happens, yes. Pain arises, absolutely. But the witness of pain remains untouched. This isn't denial. It's differentiation. Like watching a storm pass through the sky without assuming the sky itself is damaged. This understanding changes how life is lived. Problems still show up, but they no longer define identity. A mistake becomes an event, not a verdict. A loss becomes an experience, not a collapse of self. Over time, this perspective reduces the emotional charge that drains energy and clouds judgment. One simple daily practice inspired by this insight is conscious labeling. When emotion arises, name it quietly: tension, fear, anticipation. Not my fear, just fear. That tiny linguistic shift, used in yogic observation practices for centuries, interrupts the habit of ownership and creates immediate space. And yet, understanding suffering conceptually isn't enough. Wisdom must be tested, not in comfort, but in choice. That's why the Mahabharata doesn't explain truth in theories. It reveals it through moments where integrity is challenged and identity is stripped bare. One such moment begins with a long journey, and a man who refuses to abandon what truly matters. After the Great War was over and kingdoms had fallen silent, the Pandavas turned away from power. No celebrations, no crowns, just a quiet decision to leave everything behind. They began a long journey toward the Himalayas, walking away from victory as if it no longer mattered. The world they had fought for felt strangely complete and strangely empty at the same time. One by one, the brothers walked in silence. The road was harsh, the air thin, the ground unforgiving. Along the way, Draupadi fell. No one stopped. Then another brother fell. Then another. Each time, Yudhishthira kept walking. No speeches, no drama, just steady steps forward, as if something deeper was guiding him beyond emotion. Eventually, only Yudhishthira remained. No army, no family, no kingdom, just a lone figure moving toward the mountains. Somewhere along the path, a small dog appeared and began to follow him. It didn't bark. It didn't demand attention. It simply walked beside him, step for step, through snow and stone. They walked together for a long time. The dog never fell behind, never complained. When the path grew steeper and the cold sharper, it stayed. Yudhishthira never questioned it. He didn't ask why the dog followed him, and he didn't try to send it away. They shared the road in silence. At the edge of the journey, the heavens opened. A radiant figure appeared, offering Yudhishthira passage into the celestial realms. His trials were over, his virtue recognized, But there was one condition. The dog could not come. No animals were allowed beyond that point. Yudhishthira stopped. He looked at the path behind him. He looked at the dog beside him. Then he spoke calmly. He said he would not enter without his companion. Abandoning the dog now, after walking together through everything, felt wrong. Even heaven was not worth that price. The divine messenger tried again. He offered glory, peace, eternal reward. Still, Yudhishthira refused. He said that if righteousness meant leaving behind one who trusted him, then righteousness meant nothing at all. His voice didn't shake. His decision didn't bend. At that moment, the dog transformed. It revealed itself as Dharma, the principle of truth, order, and integrity itself. The final test had never been about reaching heaven. It had been about remaining whole, about not dividing inner values from outer reward. Only then was Yudhishthira invited to step forward. Not because he had won battles, not because he had suffered losses, but because he had refused to betray what walked beside him quietly all along. The path ended where clarity began. The story doesn't end with celebration, it ends with silence. A reminder that the deepest trials aren't loud or dramatic. They arrive softly, disguised as opportunity, reward, or escape. And they ask only one question: what will you leave behind to get what you want? Before unpacking the meaning of that story, it helps to understand what the Mahabharata actually is. It's not just an epic poem or a mythological saga. In Hindu tradition, the Mahabharata is a mirror of human life, politics, desire, loyalty, fear, ego, and awakening all woven together. It was never meant to be read once. It was meant to be lived through reflection, again and again, across generations. Stories like this one weren't designed to entertain. They were designed to train perception. Instead of telling people what is right, the Mahabharata shows characters facing impossible choices and lets truth reveal itself through consequence. That's why these stories survive thousands of years. They speak to something timeless in human experience, long before philosophy tries to explain it. Now, look again at Yudhishthira's choice. He wasn't asked to fight, prove, or sacrifice. He was asked to abandon. That's subtle. Most people think spiritual tests look dramatic. In reality, they often arrive quietly, as justifications, loopholes, reasonable exceptions. The dog represented the part of life we're tempted to leave behind when reward is offered. From an Advaita Vedanta lens, the dog symbolizes integrity, not as morality, but as inner coherence. When actions align with truth, there's no division inside. When they don't, tension appears. Yudhishthira didn't hesitate because his clarity wasn't negotiated. He didn't choose virtue over heaven. He saw that heaven without truth wasn't heaven at all. This speaks directly to modern life. How often do people trade values for comfort, authenticity for approval, presence for progress? The story isn't condemning ambition, it's exposing the cost of fragmentation. When inner truth is compromised, success feels hollow. The Mahabharata doesn't moralize this. It simply shows the result. Advaita takes this even deeper. It suggests that when identity is rooted in awareness rather than outcome, choices become clear. Yudhishthira didn't calculate consequences. He responded from being, not from fear. That's the mark of non-dual understanding, when action flows naturally from clarity, without inner conflict. A simple way to apply this is to notice hesitation. When faced with a decision, ask, where am I splitting myself? If the answer involves self-betrayal, over-explanation, or discomfort masked as logic, something important is being left behind. Integrity, in the yogic sense, feels quiet, not tense. This also reframes Dharma. Dharma isn't about obeying rules. It's about staying aligned with what is true in the moment. That alignment looks different in different lives. The Mahabharata respects that complexity. It doesn't offer formulas. It offers discernment. Even the journey itself carries meaning. Everyone falls away. Roles dissolve. Identity strips down. What remains? walks beside you silently. That's not a poetic detail, it's a map. When distractions fade, something essential stays, and that something doesn't demand recognition. The story leaves a quiet question hanging in the air. If clarity were offered right now, peace, recognition, success, what would it cost you internally? Would you notice the trade, or would it feel justified? That question doesn't ask for an answer yet. It simply opens the door to how awakening shows up in everyday life. In the Hindu worldview, rituals were never meant to impress the universe or negotiate favors with the divine. They were maps of inner movement. Every gesture, every symbol, every moment of silence pointed inward. Over time, many people forgot that, mistaking ritual for performance instead of process. But originally, rituals were instructions for awareness, not obligations. Take fire rituals, for example. In the Vedas, fire wasn't just physical flame. It symbolized transformation. What you offered into the fire was meant to be released internally. Habits, attachments, rigid identities. The outer act mirrored an inner letting go. Without that inner movement, the ritual was considered incomplete, almost meaningless. The same applies to solstice rituals. The longest night of the year wasn't feared, it was honored. Darkness meant rest, incubation, return to essence. Light symbolized understanding, not moral victory. When modern cultures celebrate light without honoring silence, something subtle is lost, the wisdom of pause. Advaita Vedanta takes ritual one step further by internalizing it completely. The real offering isn't grain or ghee, it's identification. Letting go of the belief, I am only this body, this role, this story. That inner surrender is the most radical ritual of all, and it requires no external setup. A simple modern ritual inspired by this is intentional stillness. Choose one moment each day, even 2 minutes, with no phone, no input, no goal. Sit, breathe, let thoughts rise and fall. You're not meditating to achieve peace. You're allowing awareness to notice itself beneath movement. Another ancestral practice is repetition, mantras. In Hindu and yogic traditions, mantras weren't magic words. They were anchors. Sounds that gently pulled attention away from habitual thinking and back toward presence. Even a simple phrase like, I am here, can serve the same function today when repeated consciously. What matters isn't tradition, but intention. Lighting a candle during the solstice can be a spiritual act, or just decoration. The difference is awareness. When the act reminds you to turn inward, it becomes ritual. When it's done on autopilot, it becomes noise. This reframes spirituality in a powerful way. You don't need more ceremonies. You need fewer unconscious moments. Washing dishes can be ritual. Walking can be ritual. Listening fully can be ritual. The sacred was never separate from daily life. Only attention made it seem so. Over time, these small inner rituals rewire how life is experienced. Less compulsion, less fragmentation, more coherence. Not because reality changes, but because the relationship with it does. This is where yogic spirituality feels deeply practical, not mystical. And when rituals move from outer form to inner alignment, something unexpected happens. Life itself starts teaching. Every situation becomes instruction. Every choice becomes initiation. And that leads directly into the final insight, the one most people resist at first, about what awakening truly is and what it is not. Most people assume spiritual awakening turns you into a better version of yourself. Calmer, kinder, wiser. And while those qualities may appear, Advaita Vedanta makes a far more unsettling claim. Awakening isn't about improvement at all. It's about disidentification, not becoming someone extraordinary, but realizing you were never the limited character you thought you were. This is where many seekers quietly get stuck. The ego loves spirituality when it promises upgrade, better habits, better image, better story. But the Hindu sages warned about this trap long ago. Polishing the ego doesn't dissolve it, it just makes it shinier. Awakening begins only when the need to become someone special starts to loosen. In yogic language, this is the shift from effort to clarity. practices prepare the ground, but they don't cause awakening. Just like cleaning a window doesn't create sunlight, it simply allows light to pass through. When identification relaxes, what remains is ordinary, quiet, unmistakable presence. This is why many people feel disoriented after deep insight. There's no fireworks, no permanent bliss. Life continues. Bills, relationships, challenges. The difference is subtle, but profound. Experience happens, but it no longer defines identity. Joy arises without clinging. Pain arises without collapse. Here's a grounded way to recognize this shift. Notice how often you narrate yourself internally. I should be better. I'm failing. I'll be okay once. Awakening doesn't silence thoughts. It breaks their authority. They become weather, not commands. That alone creates immense psychological freedom. The Hindu and Advaita traditions were clear. Liberation isn't escape from the world. It's intimacy with it. Without ownership. You still care. You still act. But you stop demanding that life confirm your worth. That demand is what exhausts people, not responsibility itself. This insight ties back to solstice symbolism beautifully. The return of light doesn't destroy darkness. It reveals it was temporary. In the same way, clarity doesn't erase the human experience. It contextualizes it. You stop fighting cycles and start trusting awareness through them. Modern spirituality often sells transcendence. Hindu wisdom offers integration. You don't rise above life. You stand firmly within it, without being swallowed by it. That grounded clarity is far rarer and far more transformative than mystical highs. A simple way to live this is radical honesty. Notice when you're striving to appear spiritual, calmer, wiser, more evolved. Gently drop the performance. Presence doesn't need branding. The moment effort relaxes, something authentic breathes again. And this is where the episode quietly turns inward. If awakening isn't about becoming, then what is left when striving stops? What remains when identity softens? That question isn't meant to be answered yet. It's meant to be lived. And it opens the doorway to the introduction that reframes everything you thought this journey was about. Now take a moment and look at your own life. Not philosophically, not as spiritually. Honestly, where are you still trying to become someone, instead of noticing what's already here? The Hindu sages, the yogic traditions, Advaita Vedanta, and even the quiet lessons hidden inside the Mahabharata all point to the same thing. Suffering doesn't come from life being hard. It comes from forgetting who is living it, from confusing awareness with the story it's watching. So here's the invitation. Not a command, not a belief. Pause more often. Question identity gently. Notice where you're trading inner truth for external reward. And experiment with small shifts. A moment of silence, an action without attachment, a choice made from integrity rather than fear. Ask yourself this: what would change if you stopped trying to fix yourself and started understanding yourself? What would soften if you stopped chasing light and allowed clarity to emerge naturally, like dawn after the solstice night? These teachings aren't meant to stay intellectual. They're meant to be lived, quietly, steadily, honestly, right where you are. If this episode stirred something in you, let me know in the comments. What insight stayed with you the most? And where do you feel called to apply it in your life? If you want to keep exploring Hindu wisdom, yoga, Advaita Vedanta, ancestral rituals, and awakening beyond spiritual performance, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. This space exists for those who sense there's something deeper and are ready to see it clearly.